They spent $2 million on a birthday party for a man everyone was terrified of, and every single invited guest stood him up. Then a woman who earns $14 an hour walked in and did something that brought a billionaire to tears. 100 crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling like frozen waterfalls, casting thousands of tiny rainbows across the private rooftop ballroom of Seoul's tallest skyscraper. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering city below, a sea of neon and headlights stretching toward the horizon like scattered diamonds on black velvet. In the center of the room, a 5-tier birthday cake stood untouched beneath a cascading arch of 10,000 white roses imported from the Netherlands. Each petal had been inspected by hand. Each sugar flower had taken a master pastry chef 3 days to sculpt. The champagne had been bottled the year the guest of honor was born. The caviar had arrived by private jet from the Caspian Sea that morning. 70 chairs wrapped in ivory silk waited in perfect rows. 70 name cards had been hand calligraphed in gold ink. 70 place settings gleamed under the soft amber light. Crystal glasses polished until they sang. Silverware arranged with military precision. Napkins folded into elegant swans. Every detail was flawless. Every preparation was complete. Every invitation had been accepted. Yet, as the antique grandfather clock in the corner struck 8 o'clock, its chimes echoing through the cavernous space, not a single guest walked through the golden doors. The young man sitting motionless in his wheelchair stared at the empty tables. His face revealed nothing. No anger, no sadness, no surprise. Just the practiced stillness of someone who had learned long ago that showing emotion was the same as showing weakness. His tailored suit cost more than most people earned in a year. His watch was worth more than most people's homes. His dark eyes, sharp and unreadable, reflected the flickering candlelight like polished obsidian. He wasn't just one of Asia's youngest billionaires. He wasn't just the heir to a corporate empire spanning 14 countries. He was also the secret successor to one of Korea's most feared underground dynasties, a legacy written in shadows, sealed in blood, and whispered about in the corridors of power across 3 continents. And on the one night he dared to hope that someone, anyone, might see him as more than a monster, more than a cripple, more than a name to be feared or pitied, everyone abandoned him. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. The roses continued to perfume the air. The candles continued to flicker. The city below continued to pulse with life. But inside this room, suspended above it all, a man who commanded empires sat completely, utterly alone. Just when he believed the evening was over, just when the last ember of hope had turned to ash in his chest, the elevator doors at the far end of the room slid open with a soft chime. A black American woman stepped out, her cleaning uniform still wrinkled from a 12-hour shift, her natural hair pulled back in a simple bun. She clutched the hand of a small boy who carried a crumpled paper bag against his chest like it contained something precious. They stood in the doorway, taking in the impossible scene before them. The magnificence, the emptiness, the lonely figure by the untouched cake. Before we continue, if you believe that compassion is stronger than fear, that kindness can reach even the darkest places, and that redemption is possible for anyone willing to seek it, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment below, and stay with me to the end, because what happened next would change every life in that room forever. Kim Young-park was born into a world most people only glimpsed in crime dramas and whispered rumors. His father, Kim Sung-jin, had built an empire from nothing, rising from the slums of Busan to become one of the most powerful men in East Asia. On paper, the Kim family controlled shipping companies, real estate developments, and technology ventures worth billions. Behind closed doors, they controlled something far more valuable: information, influence, and the kind of power that made governments nervous. Young-park never asked to inherit this world. As a child, he dreamed of becoming a pianist. He would spend hours at the grand piano in his family's compound, losing himself in Chopin and Debussy while bodyguards patrolled the gardens outside. His mother, a gentle woman who had married into the Kim family before she understood what it truly was, encouraged his passion. She believed music could save her son from becoming his father. She was wrong. When young Park was 17, his mother died of cancer. The music died with her. His father, determined to mold his only son into a worthy successor, sent young Park to the finest business schools in Europe and America. He graduated top of his class from Wharton, then Cambridge, then returned to Seoul with degrees in finance, law, and international relations. By 22, he was overseeing the family's legitimate business operations. By 23, he knew every dark secret the empire held. That was the year his father was assassinated. The killing was swift, professional, and public. A message from a rival syndicate that had grown tired of Kim Sung-jin's dominance. Young Park found his father's body in the garden where bodyguards once patrolled. The piano inside had been silent for years. Overnight, the young heir became the most dangerous man in Korea. The media called him the Ice Prince, brilliant, ruthless, and devastatingly handsome. Women wanted him. Men feared him. Everyone underestimated him. That was their first mistake. Within 5 years, young Park had tripled the family's legitimate holdings, while quietly, systematically, dismantling every criminal operation from the inside. He converted drug money into hospital funding. He transformed extortion networks into community protection programs. He took the violence his father had weaponized and redirected it toward dismantling human trafficking rings that preyed on the vulnerable. The old guard called him weak. They called him a traitor to his blood. They called him a fool who would destroy everything his father built. Young Park called it redemption. He wanted out. He wanted to be more than his bloodline. He wanted to prove that the sins of the father did not have to become the legacy of the son. He was almost free. 3 years before this empty birthday party, Kim Young Park attended a charity gala honoring his foundation's work with orphaned children. He had donated enough money to build 17 schools across rural Korea. He had personally visited each one, sitting with children who reminded him of the boy he had once been. Talented, hopeful, trapped by circumstances beyond their control. That night, as his motorcade left the venue, a car bomb exploded beside his vehicle. The bomb hadn't been meant for him. Intelligence later revealed it was targeting a corrupt politician whose car had been parked nearby. Wrong place, wrong time. Cosmic cruelty disguised as coincidence. Young Park's driver, a man named Junho, who had served the Kim family for 30 years, who had taught young Park to drive, who had attended his graduation with tears in his eyes, died instantly. The explosion threw young Park's body through the reinforced window. He landed on concrete that had been softened by rain, which saved his life, but not his spine. He woke in a hospital room 3 weeks later, unable to feel his legs. The physical therapy was brutal. Months of agony. Months of learning to navigate a world suddenly filled with obstacles. Stairs that became mountains, doorways that became barriers. The simple act of getting dressed transformed into an exhausting ordeal. But the physical pain was nothing compared to what came after. Former allies who had once sought his favor began distancing themselves. Business partners delayed meetings, citing scheduling conflicts that never seemed to resolve. Politicians who had happily accepted his donations suddenly became too busy to return his calls. Women who had once competed for his attention now looked away when he entered a room, as if his wheelchair was contagious. The whispers spread like poison through Seoul's elite circles. The Ice Prince had melted. The heir to the Kim Empire was broken. The monster had become something worse. He had become pitiable. Young Park retreated from public life. He continued running his businesses from the penthouse he rarely left. He continued funding his charitable foundations anonymously. He continued his quiet work of transformation, converting darkness into light, one project at a time. But the loneliness consumed him. He had sacrificed everything to escape his father's shadow, his reputation, his relationships, his place in the world he had been born to rule. And now, paralyzed and isolated, he wondered if any of it had mattered. The world still saw Kim Sung-jin's son. The world still saw the crime family's heir. The world still saw a monster. They would never see the man who played Chopin for orphaned children. They would never see the tears he shed on the anniversary of his mother's death. They would never see the human being trapped inside the legend. So when his assistant suggested a birthday celebration, a chance to reconnect with the world, to remind people that young Park was still alive, still relevant, still worthy of their time, he agreed against his better judgment. Invitations went to everyone. Politicians who had benefited from his political donations, business leaders who had profited from his partnerships, celebrities who had smiled for his cameras at charity events, even the journalists who had written favorable stories about his transformation. Every single one of them confirmed they would attend. The cancellations began arriving 3 hours before the party. First, a text message from a senator claiming a sudden legislative emergency. Then, an email from a tech CEO citing an unavoidable board meeting. Then, a phone call from a famous actress whose child had mysteriously fallen ill. One by one, the excuses accumulated like falling dominoes. A flight delay that only affected his guests. A traffic jam that only blocked their routes. Family emergencies that struck with suspicious synchronization. Food poisoning that somehow spread through everyone who had confirmed attendance. By the time the grandfather clock struck 7, young Park knew the truth. By the time it struck 8, the truth had been confirmed. Not a single person was coming. His assistant, a loyal woman named Mrs. Choi, who had served 3 generations of the Kim family, wept silently by the elevator. The hotel staff stood frozen at their stations, unsure whether to proceed with a party that had no guests. The chef, who had spent a week preparing the menu, stared at platters of food that would never be eaten. Young Park dismissed them all. He wanted to face this moment alone, the way he had faced every moment since the explosion. Alone in his chair. Alone with his thoughts. Alone with the growing certainty that changing his life had been pointless. He had given away billions. He had saved thousands of lives. He had transformed an empire of darkness into something that might, someday, become a force for good. And none of it mattered. The world had already decided who he was. The world would never give him the chance to prove them wrong. Young Park stared at the birthday cake. 5 tiers of artistic perfection, created for a celebration that would never happen. The candles had been lit an hour ago. They had long since burned down to stubs, wax pooling on the pristine white frosting like tears. He thought about his mother. She would have been here. She would have sat beside him and told him that the number of guests didn't matter, that birthdays were about gratitude, not validation. She would have played piano for him, the way she used to before the cancer stole her away. But she was gone, and everyone else had chosen to stay away. For the first time since the accident, young Park felt something crack inside his chest. Not his spine, something deeper. Something that had been holding him together through years of isolation and judgment and loneliness. He was about to signal his driver to take him home when the elevator chimed. 14 floors below the penthouse ballroom, Patricia Dobson had been scrubbing bathroom tiles for the past 2 hours. The Seoul Grand Hyatt's cleaning staff worked in shifts that began before sunrise and ended long after the city's elite had stumbled home from their parties. Patricia had been on her feet since 5 a.m., pushing her cart through endless corridors, making beds for people who would never remember her face, cleaning toilets for guests who would never learn her name. 5 years ago, this life would have seemed impossible. Patricia had grown up in Atlanta, the daughter of a preacher and a school teacher who taught her that every person carried a divine spark, no matter how deeply buried. She had married young, a good man named David who worked construction and dreamed of opening his own company someday. They had a son, Jordan. They had a small house in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. They had a life that wasn't wealthy, but was rich in the ways that mattered. Then David got sick. The diagnosis came suddenly, the treatment came expensively, and the end came too soon. 3 years of hospitals and hope and heartbreak. And then Patricia was alone with a 7-year-old son and medical bills that would take decades to pay. A friend from church mentioned work opportunities in Seoul. Her cousin had moved there, found cleaning work, saved enough to start over. The pay was better than anything Patricia could find in Atlanta. The work was hard, but Patricia had never been afraid of hard work. So she sold everything, packed 2 suitcases, and flew to the other side of the world with a child who didn't understand why they had to leave home. The first year was brutal. The language barrier made everything difficult. The cultural differences made her feel invisible. The loneliness was a constant companion, whispering that she had made a terrible mistake, that she should have stayed in Atlanta, that her son would grow up without roots in a country that would never fully accept them. But Patricia refused to break. Every morning, she woke before dawn, prepared Jordan for school, and reported to whatever job would have her. She learned enough Korean to get by. She found a small church community that welcomed her with open arms. She discovered that Seoul, for all its strangeness, was also full of kind people who respected her work ethic and her dignity. Jordan thrived. He picked up Korean faster than she did. He made friends at school. He stopped crying for his father every night and started dreaming about the future instead of grieving the past. Patricia reminded him constantly, dignity wasn't about the job you held. It was about how you treated people when nobody was watching. It was about showing up for others even when life hadn't shown up for you. Tonight, she had been assigned to the rooftop level, helping clear the ballroom after a private party ended early. The hotel manager had mentioned something about a canceled event, rich guests who had no-showed, thousands of dollars of food going to waste. Patricia didn't care about rich people's problems. She cared about finishing her shift, picking up Jordan from the employee break room where he did homework during her late nights, and getting home in time to make him a warm meal before bed. But when the service elevator opened onto the rooftop floor, she didn't find caterers packing leftovers. She found silence, empty chairs, untouched food, and a young man in a wheelchair, sitting alone beside a birthday cake that had never been cut. Patricia stood frozen in the elevator doorway, taking in the impossible scene. The ballroom was the most beautiful room she had ever seen. The flowers alone must have cost more than she earned in a year. The champagne bottles, the crystal glasses, the silk-wrapped chairs, everything screamed wealth beyond imagination. But none of it compared to the emptiness. 70 chairs, 0 guests, and a young man whose stillness spoke louder than any words. She knew who he was. Everyone in the hotel knew. Kim Young Park, the billionaire, the heir, the man whose family name carried generations of whispered warnings. Staff members traded rumors about him constantly. Some said he was dangerous. Some said he was reformed. Some said he had personally ordered the deaths of his father's enemies. Patricia didn't know what was true. She only knew what she saw. A man alone on his birthday, pride and pain written across his handsome features, pretending he didn't need anyone because everyone had proven he couldn't count on them. Something about his stillness reminded her of Jordan on the anniversary of David's death. That same desperate attempt to appear strong while crumbling inside. That same refusal to let anyone see the breaking. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, clear as the day she'd spoken it. Baby, fear builds walls. Kindness tears them down. When you see someone hurting, you don't walk away, you walk toward. Patricia had every reason to walk away. She was staff. He was a guest. The rules were clear. Hotel employees did not interact with guests beyond professional necessity. And this guest carried a reputation that made strong men nervous. But Patricia had never made decisions based on fear. Fear was a liar. Fear would have kept her in Atlanta, drowning in debt. Fear would have stopped her from rebuilding her life on the other side of the world. Fear was the voice that told you to stay safe while your soul slowly starved. She made her decision in 3 seconds. Patricia walked back to the service elevator, rode down to the employee break room, and found Jordan hunched over his math homework with the concentration of a surgeon. "Get your things," she said. "We're going to a birthday party." Jordan looked up with confusion. "Whose birthday?" Patricia smiled. "Someone who needs us." They rode the elevator together, mother and son, cleaning uniform and school uniform, crumpled paper bag clutched in Jordan's small hands. The bag contained his after-school snack, a chocolate cupcake from the convenience store near their apartment, slightly crushed from the journey. It wasn't much. It was everything. The elevator doors opened. Patricia stepped forward. Jordan followed. Across the ballroom, young Park looked up. For a long moment, no one moved. Young Park studied the woman and child standing in the doorway with the sharp assessment of someone who had learned to evaluate threats before they materialized. His eyes took in her cleaning uniform, the fatigue in her posture, the protective way her hand rested on the boy's shoulder. He noted the child's curious expression, the crumpled paper bag, the complete absence of fear in either face. They were not guests. They were not assassins. They were not reporters seeking a story. They were simply two people standing in a doorway, looking at him without pity, without judgment, without the careful calculations he saw in everyone else's eyes. Patricia walked forward. Her footsteps echoed in the empty room like a heartbeat returning to life. She stopped a respectful distance from his wheelchair and spoke. Her Korean was imperfect, accented, grammatically rough, clearly learned through necessity rather than education. But her words were clear. Nobody should spend their birthday alone. Young Park felt something shift in his chest. When had he last heard words spoken without agenda? When had someone last approached him without wanting money, or power, or protection, or an angle they could exploit? "You know who I am." His voice was low, guarded. Patricia nodded. "I know what people say about you. I also know that people said my husband was too sick to survive, and he fought for 3 years. I know people said I was crazy to move my son across the world, and here we are." She shrugged. "People say a lot of things. Most of it is just noise." "You're not afraid." "Of what?" Patricia tilted her head. "A man sitting alone at his own birthday party? That's not scary, Mr. Kim. That's sad. And sadness doesn't bite." Jordan stepped forward, suddenly brave. He held out the crumpled paper bag. "My mom says when someone's sad, you share what you have," he announced. "I have a cupcake and a card. I made the card myself during lunch." Young Park accepted the bag. Inside was a chocolate cupcake, slightly crushed, clearly inexpensive, and a handmade card drawn with colored markers on construction paper. The card showed 3 stick figures standing beneath a bright yellow sun. 2 were clearly an adult and child holding hands. The third stood slightly apart, in a rectangle that might have been a wheelchair. Above them, written in careful English that had been erased and rewritten until it was neat, were the words, "Everyone deserves one person who shows up." Young Park read the words, read them again, a third time. Something hot pressed behind his eyes. He blinked rapidly, forcing it back through sheer will. He had not cried since his mother's funeral. He would not cry in front of a cleaning woman and her son over a crushed cupcake and a child's drawing. But the words, the simple, devastating truth of them. Everyone deserves one person who shows up. He had billions of dollars. He had properties on 4 continents. He had influence that made world leaders return his phone calls. And tonight, on his birthday, the only people who had shown up were a cleaning woman from Atlanta and her 10-year-old son with a cupcake that cost less than $1. The hotel staff had been watching from the shadows. Mrs. Choi, Young Park's assistant, had remained in the service corridor, unable to leave, unable to watch. When she saw the cleaning woman approach her employer, when she saw the child hand over the paper bag, when she saw Young Park's composure crack for the first time in 3 years, she made a decision. She stepped into the ballroom and began giving orders. Within minutes, the room transformed. The head chef, who had spent a week preparing a feast for 70 guests, emerged from the kitchen with his team, carrying platters toward the central table. The sommelier uncorked bottles of the champagne that had been chilling all evening. A security guard who had served the Kim family for decades walked to the grand piano in the corner and sat down. His fingers found the keys, and a familiar melody filled the room. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the same piece young Park's mother had played for him as a child. More staff appeared. Kitchen workers still wearing their aprons. Housekeepers who had been cleaning rooms on lower floors. Servers who had been preparing for shifts at the hotel restaurant. Maintenance workers, bellhops, doormen. They came from every corner of the building, drawn by whispered word that something unusual was happening on the rooftop. They gathered around the table that had been set for 70 and found spaces among the empty chairs. They didn't belong here. They were staff, not guests. They were invisible, not important. But tonight, they were all anyone had. Someone began singing "Happy Birthday" in Korean. Another voice joined in English. A third added Spanish. Within moments, a chorus of languages filled the ballroom. Imperfect, unrehearsed, absolutely genuine. Jordan clapped the loudest of all. For the first time that evening, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Kim Young Park smiled. The meal that followed was unlike anything the rooftop ballroom had ever witnessed. Billionaires had dined here. Diplomats had negotiated here. Celebrities had celebrated here. But never before had a Korean billionaire shared caviar with a janitor, or debated the best way to make kimchi with a laundry attendant, or listened to a 10-year-old American boy explain why the Lakers were the greatest basketball team in history. Patricia sat beside young Park, and they talked. She told him about Atlanta, about David, about the church where her grandmother had taught her that kindness was the only currency that mattered, about the nights when the bills seemed insurmountable, when the loneliness pressed in from all sides, when she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake bringing Jordan to a country where she would always be an outsider. Young Park listened. He asked questions. He remembered details. He treated her words with the same gravity he would have given a multinational merger, because he understood, perhaps for the first time, that human connection required the same attention and respect as any business deal. Then he told her his story. He spoke about his mother and the piano, about his father and the empire built on blood, about the years he had spent dismantling darkness from the inside, converting his inheritance into something he might someday not be ashamed of, about the accident, the wheelchair, the abandonment that had followed. He did not sanitize his history. He did not pretend to be innocent. He acknowledged the family he came from, the sins that had funded his redemption, the lives that had been ruined by choices he had been too young to prevent, but old enough to remember. Patricia listened without flinching. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Redemption isn't a destination," she finally said. "It's a direction. You don't arrive somewhere and stop. You keep walking until the walking becomes who you are." Young Park looked at this woman, this cleaning woman, this widow, this immigrant mother working 14-hour shifts in a foreign country, and realized she understood something his business school professors never taught. Identity wasn't inherited. It was built, one choice at a time, through accumulated acts that either added light to the world or subtracted it. He had been so focused on escaping his father's shadow that he had forgotten the simple truth. Shadows disappear when you stand in the light. Before we reach the end, if this story has touched your heart even a little, please write "Kindness shows up" in the comments below. Let us know you're watching from somewhere in the world, and that you believe a single act of compassion can transform someone's entire life. Your words mean more than you know. The following week, Kim Young Park called a press conference. The business world expected an announcement about mergers or acquisitions. Journalists predicted a major real estate development or technology venture. Some speculated he would finally address the accident that had paralyzed him 3 years earlier. No one expected what he actually said. Young Park announced the creation of a new charitable foundation with an initial endowment of $500 million. He called it "The One Who Shows Up," dedicated to supporting single parents rebuilding their lives after loss, immigrant workers seeking dignity in foreign countries, and families caring for loved ones with disabilities. But the real surprise came next. Young Park introduced the foundation's new director of community development, Patricia Dobson. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. The corporate world collectively wondered if the ice prince had lost his mind, appointing an unknown cleaning woman to a position of such significance. Patricia stood at the podium, microphone trembling slightly in her hand, and gave the shortest speech in corporate press conference history. My grandmother used to say that showing up is the first gift, and sometimes the only one you need to give. Mr. Kim didn't need my resume. He needed someone who would walk through the door everyone else ignored. That's all I did. That's all any of us can do. She paused, steadied herself, and looked directly into the cameras. This foundation isn't about charity. It's about dignity. Everyone deserves someone who sees them as a person, not a problem. Everyone deserves someone who shows up. In the audience, Jordan sat between Mrs. Choi and the security guard who had played piano at the birthday party. He wore a new suit that fit perfectly, purchased by young Park's assistant, with strict instructions that it should be exactly what the boy would have chosen for himself. Around his neck hung a lanyard with a badge identifying him as the foundation's Junior Ambassador, a ceremonial title that came with very real responsibilities, including visiting schools to talk about kindness and organizing youth volunteer programs across Seoul. He was 10 years old. He had lost his father. He had crossed an ocean with nothing but his mother's determination. And now, sitting in this room full of powerful people, he understood something that would shape the rest of his life. 12 months after that lonely birthday, the rooftop ballroom of Seoul's tallest skyscraper filled with people once again. But this time, the guest list had changed. Gone were the politicians seeking photo opportunities. Gone were the celebrities positioning themselves for favorable press. Gone were the business executives calculating how attendance might benefit their portfolios. In their place sat families whose lives had been transformed by the one who shows up. Single mothers who had received job training and housing assistance. Immigrant workers who had been connected with legal resources and language education. Children with disabilities who had accessed therapies their families could never have afforded alone. They came from 17 countries. They spoke dozens of languages. Some arrived in suits and dresses borrowed for the occasion. Others wore traditional garments from homelands they had left behind. A few came in wheelchairs, walking with canes, navigating the world with the same determination young Park had discovered in himself. At the center of the celebration, Patricia stood with Jordan, no longer wearing a cleaning uniform, but a dress she had chosen herself. Simple, elegant, the color of midnight blue. The foundation she directed had helped over 40,000 families in its first year. She had been featured in magazines and interviewed on talk shows. She had given speeches at the United Nations and met with heads of state. But tonight, she was just a mother standing beside her son, watching a room full of people who had learned, like her, that kindness was never wasted. Young Park wheeled himself to the front of the room. The crowd fell silent. He didn't speak about business metrics or donation totals. He didn't mention the awards the foundation had received or the partnerships it had secured. He simply held up a crumpled handmade card, its edges worn soft from daily handling. 1 year ago, I sat in this room believing I had been forgotten, he said. I was wrong. I had been remembered by the only people whose remembrance matters, those who show up without being asked, who give without expecting return, who see not the wheelchair but the man. He looked at Patricia. He looked at Jordan. He looked at the hundreds of faces filling the room that had once held only his loneliness. This card was made by a 10-year-old boy with colored markers and a kind heart. It says, "Everyone deserves one person who shows up." For a year, I have kept it on my desk. Every difficult decision, every complicated negotiation, every moment when the old darkness tempts me to take the easy path, I look at these words. They remind me what matters. He paused, emotion cracking through his composure for just a moment. Tonight, I don't celebrate my birthday. I celebrate all of you. Every person who chose to show up for someone else, who proved that human connection cannot be measured by wealth or status, who demonstrated that the most powerful force in the world is simple, relentless, stubborn compassion. The applause that followed shook the chandeliers. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the staff had begun clearing the tables, Young Park sat alone on the rooftop terrace, watching the Seoul skyline sparkle beneath the stars. Patricia found him there, 2 cups of tea in her hands. She set one beside him and claimed a chair nearby. "Same view as last year," she observed. "Different world," he replied. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who had found family in the most unlikely circumstances. A Korean billionaire with blood on his inheritance and a dream of redemption. A Black American widow with a cleaning cart and an unshakable belief in human goodness. A 10-year-old boy whose handmade card had become the compass of an empire. None of it should have worked. All of it had. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't walked in that night?" Young Park asked. Patricia considered the question. "I used to wonder what would have happened if David hadn't gotten sick, if we had stayed in Atlanta, if Jordan had grown up knowing his father." She shook her head slowly. "But wondering doesn't change anything. The only thing that changes anything is showing up for the next moment, and the moment after that." Young Park nodded, understanding in a way that required no further words. Below them, the city continued its endless motion, millions of lives interweaving in patterns no one could predict. Somewhere out there, another person was sitting alone on their birthday. Everyone deserves one person who shows up. He had built companies. He had inherited empires. He had transformed darkness into light and enemies into allies. But his greatest achievement would always be the simplest. He had learned how to receive kindness, and that had taught him how to give it. If this story reminded you that kindness still exists in the world, that compassion crosses every boundary, and that showing up for someone can transform everything, please like this video, share it with friends and family who need to hear it. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that prove what the world too often forgets. Redemption is possible. Connection is stronger than fear, and everyone, no matter who they are or what they've done, deserves one person who shows up. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, the next person who needs you to show up might be closer than you think.